So today we're going to be talking about recognizing your buyers. This is one of my favorite topics within the entire human-to-human sales acumen, like the series. And the reason that this is so important, and it's something that I think gets lost in the shuffle. You may not even know you're doing it, but a lot of times your deals are stalling or you're getting ghosted because you're not giving the buyer exactly what they need in the way that they need it. And so really you might be doing all of the things right that you need to do, but that doesn't mean that it's resonating with them in the way that it needs to, which is a little troublesome. Why does this happen to us? Even like the most seasoned sellers, we still struggle because our natural instinct, because of the projection bias, let's build this sucker out. There we go. Our default way of selling is selling as if we are doing the buying. So for example, if I'm out there making a purchase, I do ABC. When I go sell, I expect that that buyer is going to follow that path of ABC. That does not work. Buyers don't buy the same way, right? First of all, we're human, so everyone buys a little bit differently. But even at the level of the buying decision process, buyers don't buy the same way. And so if we use our default mode with everybody, we're going to be in trouble because it's not going to resonate with a bunch of people. So let me show you a little bit about that. So over the years, gosh, I think it's like 100 or some years, there have been several different behavioral profiles created, and almost all of them narrow the scope down to 4 different types, whether that's communication style, personality type, etc. The most common types of people, right? The most common behavioral profiles are 4. And so if you think about that, if you sell like one of those 4, that means that one of your buyers is going to be able to resonate with that information that you're sharing, because the chances are that there's only one of the 4 that is like you. But that leaves, of course, the 75% or the 3 out of 4 buyers who are not naturally aligned with you. They're out there totally lost because they don't understand the way that you're communicating with them. They don't understand why you're giving them the content that you're giving them. It gets pretty bananas pretty fast. And I think if we just could spend some more time, we will after this session, we will spend some more time thinking about how we need to communicate and help that buyer through their decision journey. That changes things so that you're not watching deals stall for weeks on end, God forbid, months on end, or you're not getting ghosted. Like ghosting hurts and it's a real thing. And so when you follow based on how a buyer likes to buy, you have a much better chance of keeping them engaged. All right, so what I did is I created something called buyer, I call them buyer archetypes, but I like to call it the people in your neighborhood or buyerhood. Some of you will get that Sesame Street reference, some will not. But these are the 4 common people that you meet as you are out there selling, right? There's many different types of people, but these are the 4 that we see time and again. Why do I know that? I started thinking like this, probably I didn't want to think like 10 some years ago. I was doing some large deal pursuit support with a customer. And as we were doing the proposal, I found myself saying to one of the engineers who had just created a slide that had a lot of really good technical detail and even like a little Visio diagram on it. I said to him, I said, look, there's not a room full of Eddie engineers in there. We've got various people. Some are visionaries, some are going to be business oriented. This slide is not going to help anybody unless you translate it. And that kind of became a theme, right? So that time it was Eddie Engineer. Later we had Vicky Visionary. But I started to just use these almost as like a way to simplify for my salespeople how to approach the different buyers. And so when I started to consider human-to-human sales acumen, it was like a stroke of lightning. It just hit me that these are the people that I want you to recognize when you are in a deal. And I want you to have enough knowledge about them so that you can start off very early in the process aligning with their approach to buying. Now, caveat this, these are not personality types. I'm not even playing that game. I don't know if any of y'all have ever tried to read a disc profile. You need a degree to read those. I've personally never been able to make a ton of that information stick. And so looking at these buyers that repeat over 20 some years, these are the same buyers over and over again. I based my buyer archetypes on the business process of decision making, how that person makes the decision, the buyer, right? And there's a nuance there because that buyer also may not make the decision in business the same way that they make it personally, right? So you have to keep that in check too. Role agnostic. It does not matter. Sorry, my throat is drying up. It does not matter what that person's title is. What matters is how you determine and recognize who they are from the archetypes, which I'm going to show you in a minute. It just don't let a role catch you up. Like if you have an Eddie engineer, if you have somebody who's an engineer, don't assume it's Eddie engineer. There are specific criteria inside that. So that brings me to here. There are 4 behavioral dimensions that I created these built on. Sorry. Okay. So I picked 4 things that I've noted over way too many calls to count that are impactful to an opportunity outcome and have opportunity for you to adapt your approach to selling to further meet your buyer. The first dimension that I have is primary motivation, right? Like, are they motivated by the results or what their outcome is going to be, or are they motivated by that relationship and how that relationship grows over time? The second is communication preference. This is the difference between concrete and conceptual. So a buyer archetype may, depending on who it is, they may want concrete information. They may want you to speak very pointedly, succinctly, concrete. The other may be okay with a little bit more storytelling or more conceptual communication. Really important, because if you can't communicate in the language that they need you to, it won't matter how good the content is that you share or even how good they think the product is, right? They won't be able to contextualize it in their world. All right, process bias. This is a good one. So this works both ways. It is talking about process within the sales professionals organization. So the sales process, just the commercial process, and then also the buyer, their internal buying process, the steps that they have to go through in order to make a decision, right, in your favor. This is important because that individual who's doing the buying, the way that they buy is going to impact how you sell as a sales process at your company, as well as how they're buying within their own organization. That'll make a little bit more sense when we look at the archetype, but this is really the difference between very structured steps like toll gates, check the box, versus flexible, right? Like, this person's on vacation, we're not going to delay this, let's move it forward. That's what we look at for process bias. And lastly, risk appetite. This one, it's not like my natural way of looking at things, but this is repeat. This is buyer. You're going to find these buyers that are in there really focused on risk as being averse, and they don't want to take any risk. So if you're trying to position something, very innovative, they may not want any part of it. Or the ones that are risk tolerant, right? These are the people that are willing to go take a chance on something, knowing that it potentially could be a really good result for them. All right, pausing for a second. I see that a couple of people joined. Are there any questions? If you have any questions, pop them in the chat. There are quite a few things I still want to talk to you about, but I definitely want to know if you're here and if you have questions. Next up. Oh, first, there's dozens more. I like my little disclaimer. These are not, by any stretch of the imagination, the only 4 types of buyers that you're going to have out there. These are 4 buyers that they are my friends in the neighborhood. I've watched across industries, across products that are being sold, sizes of companies, even how the salesperson sells. These are the people that keep on coming back to you as a sales professional. They might be a little bit different based on industry, but it's the same buyer archetype that you're going to be talking to. We're talking to them about them in detail in a second. Here they are. Look at my AI generated images here. Here are the 4. So we are not going to be able to get into all four of these in this LinkedIn Live, but that is what my human-to-human sales acumen bootcamp is for. In the bootcamp, just quick information. It's not, I think I've confused some people about this. In the boot camp, we dig into all of these topics that I'm looking at in the LinkedIn Live into great detail, and we actually do the practical application of them. There's additional content and context that goes with some of this, but I wanted to make sure that I did these live so y'all kind of had a feel for what this was about, so that you could then determine if it's something that you want to invest in, in the fall when we have our first cohort or not. So all that to say, we're not going to look at all of these, but we have Vicky Visionary, Eddie Engineer, Connie Connector, and Danny Driver. Obviously, you could change the names, right? You don't have to say Eddie Engineer. You could just think to yourself, Enid Engineer, right? It doesn't matter, but these are the 4 buyer archetypes I have distilled and isolated. Look, when we talk about personalities in sales a lot, we think, oh, that buyer's personality. That doesn't serve us because 1, it's too complex when we think about that. 2, there's too much within personality that's fixed. I want you to be able to look at buyers in a way that is flexible, right? There are things that could potentially change that you have the ability to influence to change versus things that are really fixed. So the example that I would like to use for that is something like, you when you go and talk to a buyer, you're not going to be able to fully change yourself to be an introvert if you're an extrovert, right? You have to have some knowledge to be able to do that adaptation, but that's pretty fixed. That's going to be really hard for you, right, to do. Whereas if you have a buyer that is risk averse, you will be able to shape your process and how you sell based on their appetite for risk. So again, these are the dimensions that I chose are very relevant, and the things that where the rubber hits the road, this is the stuff that makes buyers buy or makes them ghost or stall. All right, so we are going to talk a little bit about 2 of them, Vicky and Eddie here. So Vicky Visionary, you can probably kind of guess who that is, right? This is a big picture thinker. Let me build her out here. So she is someone here, the visionary rather, is the person that's out there looking long term. Like, where's this going? Well, how is this going to matter in 5 years? They're looking at the strategic direction of the organization or even their business unit. These are big picture people. They don't want to get mired in the details. They need you to show them the long-term value of the solution, right? Like, how is this going to change my future and help my vision come to life? They want to see strategic outcomes and just work with them to envision that future state. That goes a really long way with Vicky Visionary. That is how you're going to be able to influence her. Things not to do. Do not get into the minutia. Don't mire details. Like, do not get mired in details with her. You'll lose her. She's just not wanting to talk or think at that level. And she probably has people that are there to do that, right? And then don't shut down her ideas. So for example, if she's here telling you a story or telling you her vision, do not try to cut her off and move to the next topic. Now, I know this sounds a little bit obvious, but man, if I had $1, when I've seen that happen, every time I've seen that happen, I'd be relaxed on an island somewhere. This is critical. You have to be able to adapt while you're in the moment. And that's kind of the whole purpose of these. Don't get mired in details. Don't shut down her idea generation if that's what she's doing with you. Now, if we look at the 4 archetypes, the behavioral dimensions that I just showed you, Vicky is relationship, conceptual, flexible, and risk tolerant. Right, those 4 criteria that I showed you on the previous slide. That's where she falls. By the way, you don't actually need to know that, just so we're clear. You don't have to learn these behavioral dimensions. I just want you to see them so that you can see where these archetypes came from and be able to recognize that they are based very specifically on things that matter to you and your deals. Okay. So I'm not trying to ask you to memorize those. They're just kind of a nice to know, but you will want to get to know these archetypes though. All right, so we got Eddie Engineer. Y'all have probably met someone like this. It doesn't matter if it's someone in IT or somebody who's, doing things for like generators or steel for elevators. Doesn't matter. These are the people that are very logical, very logic oriented. They like to have a method and they are all about the details, right? In terms of what they need to see to make a decision, you have to show them the data, the evidence. They have to see the process in detail to be able to have confidence that that's the decision they want to make. Be thorough, do not cut corners, right? And this is where a lot of even my really good salespeople struggle, because a lot of us are not oriented toward technical detail, right? And so we tend to go on about things which appears like rambling to any engineer when you're talking about anecdotes or case studies. They don't want vague, they don't want rambling or tangents. They want very clearly to understand all the data and information they need to make the best decision. Be accurate, triple check what you put in front of them, because I promise you they will find holes in it if you don't, and that just ends badly. And then this is the like kind of the one that it's deadly, and it's based on experience. The people that are in Eddie engineer land, they tie their usually tie their own value to their knowledge or their expertise or their experience. That is very, very precious to them. If you go in and start questioning their knowledge, this is going to end badly for you, because you are essentially kind of attacking the thing that they most value, and where they think they create the most value in this world. So I'm only pounding on that one because I have seen this go south too many times, right? So just make sure that you constantly are ensuring them that you recognize the value that they bring from their perspective. And then let's see, be accurate, et cetera. And then when we look at the behavioral dimensions, the 4 that I showed you, Eddie falls on in results. He wants results, not relationship. Concrete, which is what evidence, information, et cetera. Structure, he's methodical. That's why he wants structure in terms of the process. And then risk averse. Now, here's the thing. Eddie does not like risk in general. And that's why it's often harder to convince him to make a decision if there is overt risk that he can see. The way to allay that is to give him the detail, the knowledge, the evidence, the proof, so that he will go forward with that decision. All right, so I've been talking a lot. Any questions? Y'all still out there with me? Okay. Those are the 2. Now in the boot camp, we look at the other 2, and then we dig in much deeper, very specific examples from deep real deals as to what these individuals need and how a sales professional would adapt in the moment. But even if you don't come to the boot camp, just knowing this is going to have an impact on you when you meet these types of buyers. You will be amazed at the different type of response you get when you start communicating and acting and behaving in a way that aligns with what they need to make a confident buying decision. All right. So we're going to play a little game. This maybe will help me see who's all out there. So these archetypes, they're not coming in with a name tag, right? You're going to have to do a little bit of digging to figure out who they are. I don't want to give you a huge checklist and inventory of questions that you need to go through to figure that out. That defeats the purpose, right? But there are certain questions that we can ask, right, that are really open, high impact questions that, based on how they answer, you can get a pretty good sense of where they're falling in terms of the buyer archetypes. And then the more you learn with these questions, the more you shape how you're responding to them, how you react to what they share with you. So let's do one of these. So if this is one of the high level, big, high impact questions that you could ask when you're trying to assess and see what you're dealing with, who you're working with. What's the most important thing we need to focus on today? You start a meeting, start right there. And I'm going to show you 2 answers, and I'm going to ask you to guess which one of the archetypes it is. Answer 1. I'm not going to read it to you. Tech specs, compliance, documentation. Drop in the chats if you know who it is from our archetypes. Eddie, Vicky, Connie. And I don't see anybody responding, but it could be because of the lag. So I'm going to tell you who this is because I have confidence that y'all kind of know. This is Eddie. It's Eddie Engineer, right? What gives it away? Exact technical specs, right? Data compliance, documentation. These are Eddie. This is Eddie's world right here. you have a pretty good chance that this is Eddie. Now you're going to ask other questions, of course, in discovery that'll either align them with this buyer archetype or they may veer. But once you see this, you can be fairly confident that you are communicating and working with somebody who is of that buyer archetype. All right, next one. I want to explore what's possible here. Yay, Dave, thank you, Eddie. I want to explore what's possible here and see how your solution maps to like the 3-year growth vision. Who am I? And these are a little bit easy on purpose. Look at the words, right? What's possible here? Yeah, Jennifer, you got it. Eddie. 3-year growth vision. Yep, spot on, Dan. All right, so I'm going to reveal this answer. This lag is a little squirrely. This is, oops, not Eddie. This is Vicky Visionary. Why? Look at the words. Possible, possibility, vision, right? Growth vision. Vicky, visionary, right? It's kind of a dead giveaway. Overarching. These are the kinds of words that visionaries use in their like day-to-day vernacular. It is their world. And so when you ask this huge question, if they say things like this, you're dealing with a Vicky visionary, which means that back to what we looked at earlier. Yep, Dave, Vicky, got it. Back to what we looked at earlier in terms of what they do want to see, what you should not do. That's what you start to adopt and adapt rather your sales approach toward, because you already know for Vicky Visionary how things need to happen. Yeah, my stars, Jennifer and Dan. You got it. All right, so now what I want to do is I want you to just think about, for fun, think about a stalled deal that you have right now, like real life. And if you don't have one right now, yay, you, first of all, think of one that was stalled in the past. Okay, I'm just going to try to make this a little bit real. As you're thinking about that deal that is currently stalled, what buyer archetype do you think that you're working with? Because it's stalled, so you've probably had some conversations with them. Just kind of, write down, or you can put in the chat if you feel like it. I just want you to connect what we're talking about to your real deals. What is that buyer archetype? Okay. Once you've got that, now you ask yourself, okay, how well have I been selling to align with that buyer archetype, right? And their preferences. Have you been communicating in the way that they like? Have you been positioning risk in a way that their tolerance aligns with? And make a little bit of note there. That's really important as well. All right, and then what will you do differently to meet that buyer where they are in their world, in their approach to buying? So just take kind of a second to answer that one. All right, so if there's anybody in the chat who's brave and would like to just share kind of what they're going to do differently, you don't have to give me even a single detail. I am not any engineer in case there was any question to that. Although I married one, which questionable. In any case, share in the chat. Tell me what you think you're going to do differently. I'm always interested to see if what I've shared is going to help you in practical application. Of course, I won't be able to see that until the lag is over. All right, so this is just a real quick. It occurred to me, it was brought to my attention that I have not made it crystal clear the difference between the boot camp and what we're doing here in this LinkedIn Live. And I apologize for that if there's been confusion, but here's where it's at, right? Like in 35 minutes or 40 minutes on a LinkedIn Live, usually ends up 40 because of tech difficulties. I can only do so much, as you saw. I can only show you 2 of the archetypes at a high level. And so there's a lot more to this, and not just for this LinkedIn Live, but all of them. It was meant to give you a taste so that you can determine if this is the kind of stuff you need to work on. And I think everybody does, by the way. And if human to human sales acumen is something that you're willing to invest in to get future ready. Right. And a lot more tactical application. I'm really big into that. And I do like live coaching in these calls as well. But a lot more on that. I'll give you a QR code in a minute and you can look at the details for the boot camp. All right. Any questions for me? I know I zipped through that. Okay. So I'm going to try to distill some of this for you because I did go so quickly. First off, our default position in how we sell is, oh, I don't know why these are moving themselves. Our default position, how we sell, is the way that we prefer to buy, right? How Anita buys is how I assume my buyer is buying, right? And that's our default, right? And that means that you're leaving a lot of buyers out in the cold because your approach is not aligning with who they are, and they're not going to readily want to buy from you. Okay, so that was one of the big takeaways for you. Second takeaway is there are four very common across industry, and if you have exceptions, find me, across industries, across company types, products, etc. There's a four characters in the neighborhood that you will see often, the buyer archetypes. And because we know that it's likely one of those four, it already positions us to be able to know what we need to do to adapt for them because we've studied it here, right? Like we can see the do's and don'ts, et cetera, right? And then lastly, when deals are stalled, lean on this. This is, man, and I've seen this work in action, right? Like and we're close to month, we're going to be close to quarter end here soon too. So this is the type of exercise that I've done when we've done deal reviews toward, that we need to close before the quarter ends. We ask those exact questions, like, what do you need to do differently? What is that? Who is that buyer archetype? Where do you think they're getting stuck? And it is amazing, or else it wouldn't have made it in here, how much impact that has when you start to communicate and approach your sales, alter your sales approach to meet that buyer where they are, how they think, etc. Okay, so those are the three big takeaways that we have. And like I said, this deck and then also this recording link will be, I'll post on LinkedIn, but also it will be on our hub page for the boot camp, which you can get to from this QR code. Also, you can RSVP for the next one, which is next week. It's it's listening, it's curiosity and attuned listening. I stumbled on active there because there's a big difference between active listening and attuned listening. And that is what next week's session is all about. Active listening, pretty much table stakes at this point, right? Attuned listening is what we need to aspire to do. That's how we need to listen. Buyers love to talk about themselves, but they love more to feel heard. And that's what we're covering next week. So sign up. I'd love to see you there. And won't it be great if you're actually at the one where I finally get tech flawless? I would want to be at that one. Here's the schedule, just so you know, for the next few weeks. 4th of July, obviously nothing, plus it's just after the quarter end for you. And then we've got critical thinking. This is a biggie. World Economic Forum even calls this one out. Advocacy, which for me, and I think some of my peeps out there will know what this is, but I know Dave, you will. Advocacy is what we aspire to when we are looking at human-to-human sales acumen and being that highly differentiated sales professional. It's not trusted advisor. That's kind of table stakes. It's customer advocate sales professional. Influence, which is the fruit of all this understanding, right? If you really sharpen these skills that we're learning throughout this series, you'll earn the right to get into the details of that buyer's buying process. They will share things with you that they wouldn't share with an average salesperson. And you will earn the right to influence that process and to help not just guide them, but give them insight that will help them figure out what they should be doing altogether, right? And that is something that is earned. And then nothing on July 30th. And the last one will be Ask Me Anything. So that'll be where y'all can just hop on and whatever you want to talk about the boot camp or the human-to-human sales acumen skills, that's what we'll do on that